Welcome into another week of Every Day We're Covering. Chris Parks, SJ Munoz with you once again. And boy, college football's giving us all kinds of stuff to talk about here this week as we end championship week and move on into the playoff and bowl season. SJ, for us, it certainly was a weekend that was probably more enjoyable on maybe what we were drinking and eating rather than the football betting. But hey, we've had our ups and downs. It was a down week for sure.
Yeah, it's maybe one of those we don't spend too much time on. Just breeze past that list when you run it down here, and I was able to break out the eggnog this weekend, so that kind of tells you how the weekend went.
Yeah, had to go a little heavier this time around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little bit rough, but we got things. We got things sorted out, and we'll have some fun with some stuff down the road here for sure. And I'm sure we'll be able to hit. We hit a few that were pretty good, so it wasn't a total loss type of weekend. But we'll get to that list here in a moment. First off, speaking of eating and drinking, we always should give a little shout out to what we like to drink here as we're doing the program. And SJ, you want to start us off tonight?
Yeah, it's kind of one of the old reliable type of, at least in my world, is going with the Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale. Can't really go wrong with that. With something simple. It was a bit of a long weekend, kind of busy with family things, so it's needed something I could count on to get me through the rest of the weekend, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that's always a good solid one to kind of fall back on. I actually peered in the cooler at the Boulevard Pale Ale and gave that a long hard thought tonight, but I didn't grab it. I went a different route and ended up grabbing another little mix pack here because I wanted to try this one that was in it, and apparently it's only available in this little 12 pack mix pack. But the fine folks at Line and Kugels, who I've enjoyed many of their beers over the years, they've got one in this latest pack called Toasted Bach, and it's kind of that time of the season, get a little extra caramel flavor involved there, and yeah, this is really good. I like it. I think they have had this on the shelf before as a standalone, but apparently, kind of as a marketing thing this year, they've got it in this little mix pack with some other stuff, some old standbys that they brought back as well, like Sunset Wheat. So, yeah, pretty solid. I would give it a shot if you haven't. I recommend.
Bach's definitely on that list of beers I kind of like too, so I'll be interested to try that someday down the road here.
Yeah, pretty good stuff. Okay, so let's first off, we're going to get to our picks here to get that out of the way before we get to all the other stuff because we certainly got a lot of chaotic things to talk about and break down and kind of give our side of opinion here for, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to be doing for a while yet before we get into bowl season because we've got time to talk about things and it's certainly been controversial. But last week's picks. Here's how we went. Of course, we did all the championship games, so this is kind of a unique week, too. So I guess we can't feel overly bad about it because we probably picked some more games than we normally really would have. But we wanted to pick all the title games. So first off was Conference USA. And in some of these, we kind of split between different picks, so I'll run it down for each of us. I was going with Liberty, giving 10.5, and they did get it done. It wasn't until late. They were kind of that was a weird game. But 49-35, they get the win, so that one did go ahead and cover for us there early in the week. You had the under on that game, and of course that got blown up. It was 54 was the number, and of course Liberty almost got there themselves. So that didn't pan out too much there. The one that was nice for us on Friday night was the Pac-12. Washington was getting 9 points, and of course, not only do they cover, they win, and they get themselves into the college football playoff by staying undefeated. 34-31 the final, the win over Oregon, and really, guess most surprising for me was the fact that this game played out almost just exactly the way the two teams played before. It was the same type of game, back and forth and making big decisions on fourth down calls, those types of things. And ultimately, Washington made enough plays to get it done. Michael Penix was really good.
When the line came out, you almost were kind of scratching your head thinking, that's a huge number. Obviously, that's why we liked it and, kind of looked really attractive from our end. And then I believe it was late Thursday, or maybe even was early Friday morning. It definitely would have probably went after that money line because you were still getting some pretty good action on that. But yeah, just like you said, kind of same thing. So, maybe the fact of a little bit bigger lead early in the game, but it was surprising the fact that a lot of people were saying that Oregon didn't come to play, and you see those crazy comments and the moment's too big for him, and I don't think that was the case at all. Washington was just kind of in one of those spots where this is your time to do it or you might never get this opportunity again, and took full advantage of it and were as ready as possible as you could be to play in a game of that magnitude. So I think it was more about what Washington did than what Oregon didn't do, especially early in the game, because obviously you don't want to spend much time online during these games or value any of those opinions that come from from that world. But at the same time, it was like, just writing them off early. I was like, you knew there was going to be a comeback. It was just a matter if they could get over that hump, and they almost did. And it's it wasn't like Washington started playing that bad or turnovers. Oregon's just that explosive. It ended up being a really good game either way, even if all bets to the side. It was a great game to watch, and they might have topped that first game if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I really enjoyed watching that one. I mean, overall on the weekend, I think that was probably my favorite game to sit down and enjoy. There were a lot of good plays, a lot of big plays that were made on both sides, and that's what you like to see. Two teams kind of duking it out, and that's what you got. It wasn't a ton of some team's mistake that cost them, or a bad decision really. Yeah, even better than the first time around, because there were so many times in that first game, like we talked about before with Oregon, that pretty questionable whether or not they should have been going for it a number of times. But this time, the times they did decide to do that, they executed and got them. So it made for a very, very entertaining contest, and that was a good one to kick off the weekend. We move on to Saturday, Big 12 championship. They brought out the championship belt. The Undertaker gets to
That was
deliver it.
that was amazing. I did not see that one coming. I knew they had the NIL thing, or to try to kind of get some athletes from maybe the wrestling world, collegiate wrestling, kind of get them wrestling world. So I knew they had a deal there, but that kind of I don't think I seen much about it until you saw the belts on the field and the Undertaker come out. There wasn't a lot of talk of it beforehand. I think it was a good move, especially in that kind of a spotlight.
Yeah, and that's the side of it. Why Brett Yormark was brought in as commissioner, because he was in that world before of entertainment and concerts and all that, and he kind of knows that marketing side of things, and he sure has pushed some deals like that. And yeah, that was fun. That was a good little wrinkle. I'm sure he was not thrilled about handing it over to the Texas Longhorns, because he's been giving them the business all season long, but that they earned it. They came out and laid the whooping there on Oklahoma State. I had them laying the 14, and that came to fruition, 49-21. We were looking for the over in that game as well, and that also, of course, came true. So that was one of the good ones there for us to start the day. So I guess that's sometimes the dangers too. You have one early on, you're feeling good about yourself, get all lathered up, and then you get let down by some other games, and that's how it started to go. The MAC championship had Toledo laying 14. And we were looking for overs, and neither one of those things happened. They lost the game to Miami of Ohio, 23-14, so not very high scoring, and Miami is the winner. And the Mountain West, Boise State, I had them laying the 3. You had them getting 3, and then it changed actually to more later in the week, 3.5 or so. But Boise, kind of like I had a suspicion, I think that spotlight was better for them. They were ready for it. 44-20 was the final. The Broncos get the win, so I came out with the win in that one. SEC, Georgia, Bama. You called this one. You were looking for Bama to pull off the upset, and wanted to get them on the money line, and that hit. I had Georgia. I thought they were just going to be too good, but but Bama came to play, and they made the plays. Every time that there was a situation where they needed to make something happen, they sure did. And I guess that kind of maybe it carried over a little bit. That last play the last week against Auburn, they needed that miracle to win that game, and boy, they took advantage right from the get go against Georgia. It was a pretty good game. I mean, I don't give Georgia credit; they were in it too, but more of the big plays and more of the kind of like. I guess toughness was coming from the Bama side. It sure seemed like.
Yeah, and I think kind of the same thing with Washington goes. There was more of Alabama than it was against Georgia. They were in it. They battled back on a couple different occasions. Just the momentum that Alabama had, like you said, I thought it was going to carry over. And on top of that, I just mentioned also last week they're a little bit more tested. Not saying obviously Georgia was undefeated and they earned every accolade that they got this season, but they just had a little bit of a, and I don't want to say an easier road, but for them it was managed, a little bit more smooth, a little more smooth sailing, if you want to call it that. So I kind of thought that would play in there, and just of course Alabama's been there and done that so many times. I'm not expecting much of a run in the playoffs, maybe, but who knows? they've proven a lot of people wrong this season. I think many were calling, kind of saying Saban's, best days are behind him, and maybe that's what's motivating them to keep going on this run here.
All right, moving on to the American Athletic Conference. We were looking there for Toledo to get a win. SJ had them laying 4, and then we were looking for the overs in that game as well at 50.5, and that did not come to fruition on either side. SMU wins it 26-14, another one of those low-scoring ones where we kind of didn't see that coming. But the Mustangs win. Sun Belt, we were both on Troy, and that was one of the better ones of the day. I probably should have hit this one a little heavier. I did feel pretty good about it, and I had him involved in some of my other bets yesterday as well. But they were laying 6.5, and they took care of business against App State. 49-23 the final there, so we hit that one. And then the nightcaps, it was a Big Ten championship. We were looking for Michigan to lay the whooping down, and they did not do that. They were just kind of slow chugging along throughout the game. They ended up winning it, but it was only a 26-0 final, and we were looking for a lot more points to be put up on the board to at least maybe thought Iowa would sneak a score in there somehow or another, a couple field goals perhaps, and that Michigan would continue to kind of pound the run game a little bit better than they did. They struggled a little bit running the ball at times there against Iowa, so that was kind of an interesting result, I thought.
Yeah, we'd think. I mean, 5 touchdowns would be nothing too big for them to get on the board, and then like you said, Iowa sneaks in a touchdown or a field goal, then you hit it right there. It kind of had the feel of a spring game, to be honest. Like it just they were. I mean, if going through the motions, that's the definition of it right there. They obviously didn't sense any danger of losing the game. Just kind of showed up, got in and got out and got your win and moved on. It was definitely wasn't anything I stuck with for more than a half, to be honest with you. It wasn't worth watching after the first couple quarters there. I definitely put my attention more towards that next game that you're going to talk about, Louisville and Florida State.
Yeah, and the ACC championship, and of course, a lot of people had their eyes on this just because the way the other games had shook out during the day, and we knew it was going to cause a potential controversy conversation, and we got it. But we were looking. We both had Louisville. We thought that the Cardinals were going to pull it off. It just kind of set up as maybe one of those games where Cards could knock them off and give them that first loss. But give Florida State credit; their defense really came to play. The linebacking crew was just all over the place, and they got in the backfield a lot. 16-6 ended up being the final. They get the victory and stay undefeated on the season. And, part of it was...
It didn't matter, though, did
it? Yeah, no, it didn't matter. Yeah, part of it was that Louisville, honestly, I didn't think played very well at all. Their quarterback had a number of questionable decisions. Late in the game, they got the big punt block and had the ball deep in FSU territory, and you thought, okay, well, all they got to do is a couple nice plays, and they're in the end zone here. Had an opportunity, but the terrible throw behind the receiver as he made his break. I mean, the receiver had no chance on the play. It was picked off, and that sealed the deal there for Florida State pretty much at that point. So give FSU credit. Yeah, they made the plays to get it done and get the win. But like you said, at the end of the day, did that matter for Florida State? Not according to the College Football Playoff Committee. And that's where we're moving here to next. We knew there was going to be somebody that was going to be angry, obviously. The way that it shook out, you've got 3 undefeated teams, which in itself is pretty rare. I mean, that's part of this whole deal, too, is that when is the last time that we've had this many teams that we felt like were all pretty solid towards the top and maybe could all compete with each other fairly well also. That hasn't happened in a long time, so that set the stage for this argument. But you've got 3 undefeateds, you've got 3 others with 1 loss, actually 4, I guess, really, if you want to throw another in, that are all 1 loss that are pretty solid teams that we think as well. And, somebody's going to get left out and be angry about it. I think after the games were done on Saturday, everybody had a feeling that what happened was maybe what was going to happen. Now, is it what should have happened? No. I mean, let's be honest. If you're going by the book, I mean, everybody's going to sit down and analyze this 10 different ways. And, of course, the argument always comes back to with the committee, we're trying to get the 4 best teams into the 4 best teams. That's what they always, lean back on. But this would be the first time in modern college football era when we've been doing this BCS and 2-man and 4-man and whatever playoffs that an undefeated major conference champion has not been involved in the deciding the winner. And that's what Florida State got. Even though they found a way to get it done, they don't get rewarded and they get kicked out because there's so much of that SEC influence out there, and Alabama gets that last spot. And they certainly have a lot to be upset about.
Yeah, it's one thing if you're talking about, back, a number of years ago when, Boise was putting their, undefeated seasons or, that made their big runs, or even, Central Florida, which they went as far as to crown themselves national champs. So, I mean, there's the blueprints there within the same state. So I'm sure they can give, their neighbors, to the west there a little bit of advice of how to, go about claiming a national title. But in all seriousness, yeah, I understand you're looking at the best team when it comes to the committee. But I think as far back as, playing, youth sports, playing, checkers, tiddlywinks, whatever the hell it may be, if you're undefeated, you're one of the best, regardless of what the schedule is or who you played or what conference or what your affiliation or, who donates money to you or who, what sponsors in bed with you, so on and so forth. Like if you're undefeated, you're undefeated. I mean, I guess this is something that maybe when they, tweak it needs to be written into the, the bylaws that if you're undefeated, you're automatically in, because I think that should be, common sense, but obviously it doesn't really mean much. I mean, had they known, that wasn't even an option, can you imagine what kind of game you would have got from them yesterday? Like, you're going in thinking like, all we got to do is win and we're in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I can't imagine that emotional roller coaster that they had to be on, and kind of just like the gut punch that they had to, I mean, they probably saw it coming, and if you got down to the truth of it and really asked them like, what's your honest feeling? I'm sure you're going to hold out hope, because they should, because there's a good chunk of the population that want one of the best four teams, right? Well, not the way the system's set up now, and I know you're always going to complain. Next year it's going to be whatever the the 13th team's going to think they got in, but in this case, there's no really way to rationalize it from someone that thinks that they shouldn't be in the playoff.
Well, yeah, and somebody brought that up too. I saw, talking about when we had some internal discussions with some of my buddies too. Like, oh well, yeah, next somebody's going to argue about the 13th and the 14th spot.
Well, if they're undefeated, then let them argue. But I don't think the 12 or 13 seed is going to be undefeated. So
yeah.
If they win them all, then they have an excuse. If not, you're more likely looking at least a 2 or 3 loss team, probably in all likelihood.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yes, when you have undefeated, then you can talk.
Yeah. Well, and my thing is, okay, yeah, we will, but at least in that scenario, we're going to know that a team that has a chance to be the national champion is going to be in that field. They're going to be in that top 12. And if they're not, it's their own fault that they didn't earn it their way there. At that point, you're not going to split enough hairs that somebody's going to get left out of a 12-team field that really is a potential national champion and earned to be a national champion. That's kind of my honest.
And while it's still the NCAA and it's kind of a tournament thing, it's not going to be the same deal as a March Madness. Obviously, way less teams, but even with the upsets, when those the early games are going to be probably pretty ugly and a lot of blowouts, just because there's a huge gap from even the top 4 to to the next 8, 9, 10 after that. So it's not going to be there's not going to be as many Cinderellas. The one shiny moment won't be as shiny for the football version of the playoff as it is in that March Madness deal. So it's a totally different ball game. So I don't think. I mean, of course, you're going to complain about it, and honestly, a lot of it is just for conversation, kind of keep interest in the sport, and ESPN and the outlets are going to love it because they can keep talking, for months and months before the games start. But like you said, the 12th and 13th team aren't the same as the 5th and 6th team.
Yeah, and the interesting other side of this too is we're never going to know, but it sure doesn't look good when there's such a major influence from the major media brand in the sport that has a big tie to the conference and relies on the revenue from the conference for the team that got in instead. That looks even more shady of the way that panned out.
Well, and a lot of people were considering the fact that in Alabama, right, even after they won, that Georgia maybe was still getting in too.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of shows you. I mean, that was out within minutes of that, of the Bama celebrating in Atlanta. It was out quick. Mm-hmm. So I mean, who knows who put it out there? Who knows what kind of what the meaning of it was? But that was a popular opinion pretty quick after that one ended.
Yeah. When we were arguing about this, I thought, what would be really interesting is if let's say they decide that Alabama and Georgia both get in, and Texas gets left out. And then Texas decides, well, piss on this. We're not going to go to the SEC. They give Florida State a little ring and say, hey, you want to form a conference? And they go start
I,
picking off other teams that probably would be willing to join them at this point.
when Texas of all schools, that would be the school to do something of
Oh,
that
yeah.
sort. So it would not. And when you kind of say it laughing and jokingly, but that's honestly not that far out of the realm of possibility had that happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, of course, the other thing that we were kind of watching too is, had things shook out even differently with the games yesterday. If it came down to an Alabama Texas argument, and then Texas obviously won the game on the field earlier in the season, but there still would have been a strong push, I'm sure, to make Alabama the team that got in over them, that would have really, I think, caused an uproar. I mean, it's bad enough that a team that's undefeated is not in this thing, but if a team had already beaten another team and then they get in over them, that would make it even more interesting.
Well, even though they're joining, the type of brands of Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, it's still the SEC is still kind of it's not going to be all inclusive and all welcoming
Mm-hmm.
in the first few years.
Yeah.
There's still going to be their core of Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Florida. That's and then everybody it kind of expands out of that. So, you see in other conferences like with like the Big Ten, where it's Michigan, Ohio State, and everybody else, or what. No matter what conference it is, there's kind of that the schools that think they or either they do or they think they pull the strings. And it's going to take Texas a little while to kind of fit in that mold, especially with the history of what they've done in other conferences and kind of just how they feel about themselves and then what the reality actually is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I'm sure there's some trepidation from people in the higher ups in some of those other schools with welcoming them, and them in particular, in, like you said, because of their track record with how they have a history of screwing things up. So, yeah, I mean, this didn't obviously, like I said, somebody was going to be upset, and it was probably not going to, somebody's going to make an argument one way or another that it wasn't fair. But boy, it really sucks when a team put their heart out there to stay undefeated and they're not rewarded for it. It just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But
Well, the last thing on it I'll say is like, it's kind of one thing to, when you have an argument, of course, like we said, there's always gonna be somebody that feels left out, but this is just so clear cut is why it's more, and you saw it coming for reasons that were basically the whole thing you're trying to get away from is deciding that on the field you're still doing the exact same thing you've been doing with whether it be the polls, the BCS, whatever it is, it just has a different name on it. So that's that's kind of frustration. That's kind of the bad part about it. There's very little discussion that they shouldn't be in, but they're not in, and you have to have it, or there's no reason they shouldn't be in. I guess is a better way to say it. So um, that's just the way it is, and adjust and adapt the best you can. I mean, next year they'd be in it, so hopefully they can make a run and give some people some payback, have a little revenge on their mind next year.
yeah, a couple other quick hits I just wanted to mention about this too. You think about, had Florida State been in that four instead of Alabama, then you have a field of teams that none of them have beaten the other. Now Alabama's in, Texas is in, Texas has beat them, so that provides a little different wrinkle than the way it would have been had none of them met already. So I don't know. That's kind of from a financial standpoint, maybe that is kind of wrong. And then obviously the lobbying was kind of annoying. You get that every year from Saban, and I even saw Smart make comments yesterday like that. No, everybody should understand that we're one of the four best teams. Well, and that, I guess that's what I was getting to is, at the end of the day, maybe it is. Maybe it is the four, best teams. Maybe Alabama is better than Florida State. A lot of people think that, and maybe we even would think that. But that doesn't mean that that's the way that this should have played out, because there's kind of set rules and criteria, and Florida State met that criteria, and then they did not get selected. So yeah, it's kind of irrelevant what we think of the matchup. That's the whole point, I guess, is why it's so frustrating from a fan standpoint that's kind of on their side.
Well, the point that you think you have to even start lobbying and getting into that world and kind of making your point well before you're even, I mean, you might not even be technically in the championship game yet, but people are already throwing their name out there and trying to get people to side with them and convince them that, I mean, if it's gonna become politics, let me know now, and I'll find a different sport to watch. There's other things to do. Like, I don't need no more damn politics in my life. I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Yeah. Well, and what makes it so interesting from a fan's perspective, from what I've seen in the last week, is the sport is healthier than it's ever been. The popularity is growing. As some of the numbers we've seen from some of these viewership and some of these championship games is incredible. People are excited about it, and the product is good. I mean, we've seen some good games, and that's what we love, and we want to keep talking about that rather than nonsense like this that have nothing to do with the actual outcomes on the field. So yeah, we're all ready for that expansion next year for sure, and we can eliminate this nonsense and not have to have these discussions anymore. But that's what we got. So it's Michigan who ends up being the 1, Washington is the 2, Texas is the 3, Alabama's the 4. So it'll be Michigan, Alabama, Washington, Texas, which provides definitely some interesting football. We kind of even talked to each other a little bit on Saturday as we're watching those night games. The way that we were kind of unimpressed with Michigan, boy, they're going to be in trouble when they match up against a team that can really stop the run, which is something Alabama's not too bad at doing. And I kind of had in my mind when I was thinking about that Texas, because of the way that they've played the run here lately. If that would have been the matchup for them, I would not have liked it at all. But even with Bama, I think they're in trouble because there's talent obviously on the offensive side of the ball for Alabama, and yeah, their defense just always gets better and better as the season goes along. Now, I'm not saying Michigan doesn't have a good defense too; they do, but do they have the dynamic offense to be able to beat a team like that can do a little bit more? That's going to be interesting to find out.
Hasn't looked like that as of late, and you kind of run into a little bit of a quandary here if you start kind of just like we talked about going through the motions against Iowa and kind of just not being obviously last Ohio State game was a huge game, and that was a big time game, so it was only a couple of weeks back, but you kind of start just thinking that it's in the bag type of thing, or you've been probably maybe the odds on favorite now in a lot of people's minds. I haven't seen any actual odds yet, but just popular opinion at least you're one of the favorites to take home the title. So you're kind of in some dangerous spot here. You need to maybe refocus. I mean, I can imagine just seeing that Alabama across from you should be enough to get you ready. But whether you're ready or not, I don't like kind of with you. I don't know if they have the playmakers to to really do it early in the season. It looked like it. I mean, they had some explosive plays and a lot of big time plays throughout in the first 5-6 games. But I don't know what change. Obviously, they've been through a lot this season and kind of had their scandal, if you will. But it does not look like the same team it was at the start of the year, and maybe that scandal is part of the reason.
Yeah, that very well could be. Yeah, they've certainly had a lot of other distracting stuff going on. That's for sure. So yeah, that's the other one matchup. The other one will be interesting. I mean, I was impressed with the way Washington played Friday. They seem to be able to hit the big play really, really well, as good as any team, obviously in college football. I think. Now, whether they can do that against a really good Texas defense, I don't know. They're going to have their hands full for sure. But that does provide I guess, intriguing matchup, just because it's kind of strength on strength when you're looking at Washington's offense against Texas's defense. Now, the other way around, too, Texas hasn't been as dynamic until this last week on the offensive side of the ball. But you got to imagine they're going to be able to do some things against a Washington defense that's had a tendency to give up some points, too. So that's an interesting matchup there as well.
Yeah, my first thought when I saw that and just straight up was just overs all day, overs, overs, overs. That's I can't pick it either way, especially early. Of course, things are going to shake out here in the next whatever couple of 3 weeks leading up to the game. Maybe some injuries, who knows? Players opting out, or maybe every now and again there's a disciplinary issue that comes up before these big games, so that could play in too. But just the initial thought is I think we could be kind of that Oregon Washington type of matchup where it's a really real big time shootout, and just whoever makes the last player has the ball last may end up coming out on top.
Yeah, fun one. Of course, we did find out as well a lot of the other bowl matchups here today. Everything's pretty much out there as far as who's playing who and where. And I know you kind of were peeking through the list there and had your eye on pegging a few games. So why don't you give us a little insight into what you think might be some fun ones to watch?
Yeah, it's obviously like I just said a little bit early to kind of even think of making any types of wagers or any plays as far as that goes. But this is more of just on paper, recent history or trends. Just maybe some matchups that I thought kind of did a top five here, if you will, of just intriguing matchups. And like I said, on paper, it's we might not even. I mean, like we said before, we're gonna make a pick on every game, but this might not be something we actually play. But just to off kind of off first glance, what looked good to me, and the top five I saw was and these are not really in order. It's not like
Mm.
this isn't David Letterman, but I just
Top 10
took five
countdown.
that,
Come on.
yeah, break out the keyboard, bro. All right, so this the five I saw that looked pretty intriguing was the first Cotton Bowl is Missouri and Ohio State. I think we get
Oh,
obviously could be some points scored in that game as well, and just two teams also that don't really play very often for being not that far,
yeah, that's true.
from each other. They're not. It's not like it's a long trip either way. Obviously, a neutral site, of course, but
Hmm.
being as close as they are, those campuses, they don't. I can't remember the last time Missouri. I mean, I'm sure maybe they haven't played before. I at least in my lifetime, have really followed it closely. I can't remember seeing that
Yeah.
matchup too often. Next one I saw was involves our buddies down in Tallahassee. They're probably a little salty there, but they get Georgia in the Orange Bowl. Obviously, two very good teams. Georgia, a couple plays away from being in the playoff, and I don't know what Florida State could have done to get in the playoff. So, but they're obviously a playoff worthy team. Both is basically the point of that comment. So that should be a good matchup. Another one that's usually pretty exciting. They do a good job of pairing their teams, and I don't know. Are they still is it still PlayStation? I mean, I miss the days of Tostitos, but
Oh, yeah.
it could still be the
PlayStation. Yeah.
PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. So Liberty and Oregon, just kind of random. Honestly, that's why I think it looks intriguing. Liberty being in a game of that magnitude
Hmm.
against a team like Oregon, and at least last word I saw was Bo Nix is expected to play in the game. That's always something to watch, especially with people going to the next level, or just even injuries, or just being done with that and kind of ready to move on to the next stage in their life. A lot of players opt out or choose not to play, and at least one for sure that we know he'll be in the game. So I think that kind of keeps the intrigue there.
Hmm.
This is kind of one at a left field too, and of course it's in one of my favorite cities. I'm sure you can agree to this: the Las Vegas Bowl, Utah and Northwestern. Again, teams that don't play all too often, and shoot, I mean, Northwestern put together a pretty damn good season considering what they were facing coming into it with basically a dude they just said here, coach. So figure that one out. So I think that would be interesting. And Utah's always a tough out, so they've had some good Rose Bowls, especially against the likes of Oregon, and think so. They're usually good in the bowl games. And the last one, this could be another kind of shootout type of deal, and it's a good place for a shootout. It seems to happen often, but the Alamo Bowl, we got Arizona matching up against Oklahoma. Uh, Again, just teams that you would think play often don't play often, and these were almost Pac-12 mates, a decade ago, and they could have been playing every year. So that's how quickly things change. And now Oklahoma's going to the SEC, and Arizona's Big 12 bound, right? Two more that I just kind of threw. I saw the names. Kansas and UNLV's matching up. I think it could be might be the overs on that one too. And then Oregon State and Notre Dame, depending. Um, I don't know. It's going to be interesting with the quarterback transferring from Oregon State, but Sun Bowl's usually a good time out there.
Yeah, those are some interesting games. I just a couple of that caught my eye here as I was scanning through the list. I think that new bowl game, of course, they also have said that there's going to be a mascot that is edible in this game. We'll see how that plays out. But
Oh,
the Pop Tarts Bowl,
I know where you're going. Yeah.
Kansas State.
Are they gonna have a toaster as well?
I don't know. They stick him actually in the toaster, and so
Well,
we'll
a
find
lot of
out.
people. I guess I don't know. Maybe I was never a Pop Tart guy, big time, but apparently microwaving Pop Tarts is a thing as well.
Oh,
I don't
okay,
know.
okay. Yeah, I was always a toaster guy. I don't
Not my
know.
world. It just I've heard that.
Well, in what flavor? I mean, what are we talking? Are we talking, frosted cherry here? Are
I
we
was more to the
talking?
toasted strudels. That was my cup of tea.
Yeah, I mean, this is controversial, but yeah, K State taking on NC State. I could see that being an interesting football game. Got kind of two similar style type teams, the way that they play. Kind of ground it out a little bit, and then throw in a few gadgets here and there and play good defense. So that could be a fun game. Interesting matchup just because of the history, I guess. The Texas Bowl. Oklahoma State gets to host Texas A&M in that game. Two former conference mates there from the Big 12, and Okie State, I'm sure, is disappointed with the way they played in that title game, so might be ready to bounce back. And I'd like to see Ollie Gordon up against A&M trying to run the ball. That could be fun. And then another matchup that I saw that I think will be a little bit of a fun affair. Duke's Mayo Bowl could be pretty interesting. My boys, West Virginia, they're taking on North
Neat.
Carolina, and again, that's two kind of similar types of teams. And that's not that they're both going to be playing not far from home, either one of them. So that could be a good crowd for that game too. That's always one of the fun ones, also, just with
I was
all the
wondering if you
gimmicks.
had I thought maybe you had your eyes on your West Virginia boys, and also if the game ends up not being so great, you can always kind of one of those you can't look away things at the end with the Mayo dunking,
The Mayo
uh,
Bath, yeah.
with instead of the Gatorade bath, yes, the
uh,
Mayo.
at least they give him the big
That wouldn't
hat.
be me.
Yeah, at least they give him the giant hat to wear because that's a little better than I think. The first couple of times they just did it straight up, like on the guy's like regular hat, and then, yeah, that's not cool.
I mean, you got if you had Will Levis in the house, he'd be just probably spooning it out and eating it, putting it in his coffee. Like,
Yeah, no doubt.
that's,
That's nasty.
that's some interesting behavior. I don't know. You might need to get maybe talk to somebody about that.
Yeah, he needs some help, that's for sure. Before we leave you, one other game we got to mention because it is the only football game that we'll actually see here soon, and it'll be next Saturday. Annual tradition, Army Navy, always happens after the conference championship games a week later, and it gives everybody a little bit of taste of football while we miss it for a while. 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Army's a 2-point favorite over Navy. I've always personally been a Navy man. Grandpa Bob was in the Navy, and many of his brothers as well. So I gotta do the go Navy beat Army. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick a side, I suppose I'd pick that. My dad was in the Navy as well, and uh, some family. I guess I have some family on both. The closest relative to me would be that. But I mean, what about Air Force, man? Why do they always get screwed? They've actually been a pretty damn
That's
good
true.
football program, and then they need that spotlight. So one year, I'm just saying, like, do it right, man. Maybe have like we talked about the WWE earlier. Get a triple threat match going, something. Let's
They get to tag
go.
in at
Like
halftime or something.
we can figure it out.
All right, yeah. So that's what we've got here for this week. After the championship dust is all settled and we get ready for bowl season, obviously we'll have a lot more fun as far as the picks and the wagering are concerned. Once we actually get into it here, we'll have some games to talk about next week as we prepare for the following weekend. So that'll be good to get back on that track. But otherwise, we appreciate you connecting with us. If you like, on social media, on Twitter, it's at CherokeeCP, at SJMBets. We, of course, post information related to the program there as well, promote, interact throughout the week, so we'd love to hear from you there. You can catch the podcast, of course, on multiple platforms, whether it be Spotify, Amazon, or Google Podcasts, wherever you get it, you can track it down. And we'd appreciate it if you share that information with others as well to spread the word and grow the community. We would certainly love that, and we always would love to hear from you. Usually put up a poll during each podcast that's posted as well, so you can give us your thoughts on those things there as well. That'll do it for another week here for us. That's SJ Munoz. I'm Chris Parks. That's going to do it for another week of Every Day We're Covering. We'll get back to some more covers next week.